The tires crunched on frost-dusted gravel as Mason Parker's weathered pickup truck crawled down the long, winding driveway. Thin wisps of December snow drifted across the Oregon countryside, painting the landscape in muted shades of white and gray. Mason's calloused hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, the only outward sign of the storm raging inside him. 5-year-old Emma sat bundled in the passenger seat, her small face pressed against the window, breath creating little clouds on the cold glass. $15,000. His entire world had been distilled down to that number. $15,000 for this abandoned farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. $15,000 left from a life that once included a seven-figure construction company, a waterfront home in Seattle's exclusive Madison Park neighborhood, and a future that had seemed bulletproof. Emma clutched her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hoppy, the sole surviving treasure from their previous life. The toy's once white fur had grayed with love and time, one ear, slightly unstitched, held together with Mason's clumsy attempts at repair. He'd sold everything else during those desperate months after Rachel died. Everything except Mr. Hoppy. The farmhouse emerged from behind a cluster of weathered oak trees, 2 stories of faded white clapboard, a sagging porch and overgrown bushes pressing against peeling window frames. Not exactly the dream home he'd promised his daughter. Emma's eyes widened with childish hope. "Is that it, Daddy? Is that our new house?" Mason's throat tightened. The last time he'd seen this level of excitement in her eyes was before the hospital calls, before the funeral, before the foreclosure notices. "That's it, sweetheart. That's our new beginning." The words felt hollow, but he forced a smile. What else could he do? His mind drifted back to the day that had marked the beginning of the end. 10 months ago, a perfect Sunday morning. Rachel making pancakes shaped like animals while he sipped coffee at their kitchen island, surrounded by Italian marble and designer appliances, their phones ringing simultaneously with the hospital's caller ID. Rachel collapsing in their sunroom just 20 minutes later, the aneurysm in her brain a silent assassin that had been waiting to strike. The doctor said it was quick, that she hadn't suffered. As if that somehow made it better. The construction company, Parker Restoration, had been his pride, 12 years of sweat and sacrifice built from the ground up. Specialized in historical restorations across the Pacific Northwest, featured in architectural magazines, courted by wealthy clients with more money than taste. None of it had mattered after Rachel died. Deadlines missed, contracts unfulfilled, employees unpaid. The business had collapsed as surely as his heart had. Mason blinked, forcing himself back to the present. The truck rounded the final bend in the driveway. He slowed, an unfamiliar sensation prickling at the back of his neck. Something was wrong. Smoke. There was smoke rising from the chimney of the supposedly abandoned farmhouse. Mason's hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles whitening. His stomach clenched with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Someone was inside his house. The house that represented his last chance, his final attempt to build something from the wreckage of his life. He pulled the truck to a stop 30 feet from the front door. "Emma, stay here for a minute, okay? I need to check something." Emma nodded, already distracted by Mr. Hoppy, whispering something into the rabbit's tattered ear. Mason stepped out of the truck, the cold air biting at his face. The scent of wood smoke hung in the air, undeniable evidence that someone had made themselves at home in the property he'd emptied his bank account to purchase. 6 weeks ago, he'd driven out here for a rushed inspection before the online auction closed. The place had been empty then, dusty and neglected, but structurally sound enough to save with his expertise. The real estate agent had mentioned it had been abandoned for years after the previous owner died without heirs. Perfect for a desperate man with a young daughter and nowhere else to go. Mason approached the front door cautiously, years of construction, site awareness, making him mindful of loose boards and unstable steps. The porch creaked beneath his weight, announcing his presence to whoever was inside. The door was slightly ajar. He pushed it open slowly, muscles tensed for confrontation. The scene inside stopped him cold. The main room had been swept clean, free of the dust and debris he'd seen during his inspection. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace he'd been certain would need a complete rebuild before it was safe to use. But what truly froze him in place were the 2 young women standing in the center of the room, Identical expressions of terror in their nearly identical faces. Twins. They had to be twins. Same delicate build, same long blonde hair pulled back in practical ponytails, same wide blue eyes now filled with unmistakable fear. They couldn't have been older than 25. For a moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the gentle pop and hiss of the fire. Then one of the young women stepped forward, hands raised as if to ward off a blow. Please, please don't call the police. We'll leave right now. We just needed somewhere. Her voice cracked, betraying a deeper desperation than her composed face suggested. Mason found his voice. Who are you? The words came out harder than he intended, fueled by the shock and the complicated emotions of the past 10 months. The other twin moved protectively in front of her sister. We're sorry. We thought this place was abandoned. We've been here for a few weeks. We haven't damaged anything, I swear. Her words tumbled out rapidly, practiced, as if she'd rehearsed this explanation. We'll pack up and go. Just please don't call the cops. Mason's gaze swept the room more carefully. Despite their trespassing, they'd treated the place with unexpected care. The floor had been swept clean. The broken windows he remembered were now covered with cardboard and plastic, sealed tight against the December cold. The fireplace wasn't just functional, it had been properly cleaned and made safe. This wasn't the work of vandals or partiers. How did you even know about this house? Mason asked, his tone softening slightly despite himself. The first twin, the one who had spoken initially, wrapped her arms around herself. Up close, she looked exhausted, with dark circles beneath her eyes and a thinness that spoke of missed meals. We used to live in Riverdale, about 15 miles from here. Everyone knew this place had been empty for years. We didn't think anyone would... She paused, swallowing hard. We didn't know someone bought it. Daddy? All three adults turned. Emma stood in the doorway, clutching Mr. Hoppy, her brown curls wild around her face after escaping her hat. She looked at the two women with curious eyes rather than fear. Emma, I told you to stay in the truck. Mason moved toward her instinctively, protective father mode overriding everything else. I know, but it's really cold, and I saw the smoke. Emma stepped further into the room, drawn by the warmth of the fire. Her head tilted as she studied the twins. Are these ladies going to live with us? The innocent question hung in the air, unanswerable, a child's simple curiosity cutting through the tension of the adult world. No, sweetheart, we're leaving. The second twin spoke quickly, her voice gentle when addressing Emma. We're really sorry. We'll be gone in 10 minutes. But Emma had already walked further into the room, her small hand reaching out to feel the fire's warmth. It's nice in here, much better than the motel. She looked up at her father with the directness only children possess. Can they show us how they made the fire work? You said the fireplace was broken. Mason felt something shift inside his chest as he looked at his daughter. This little girl who had watched her mother being lowered into the ground, who had slept in a cramped motel room for weeks, who had stood silently as their possessions were sold one by one. Here she was, still capable of simple, uncomplicated kindness. He turned back to the twins, really looking at them now. Beyond the fear in their eyes was something deeper, something he recognized because he saw it in his own mirror every morning. The kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from having nowhere to go, no safety net, no plan B. Sit down, he said quietly, gesturing to the makeshift seats they'd arranged around the fire. The twins exchanged uncertain glances. Please, Mason added. Just sit. Let's figure this out. 20 minutes later, they were all seated around the fire. Emma had curled up against Mason's side, fighting sleep but determined to stay awake for whatever happened next. The twins sat across from them, perched on the edge of a wooden crate like birds ready to take flight at the first sign of danger. I'm Haley, the first twin said softly. This is my sister, Olivia. We're twins, obviously. Obviously, Emma murmured sleepily. Despite everything, Haley's lips curved into a small smile. I'm Mason. This is Emma. He paused, searching for the right words. Tell me how you ended up here. The twins exchanged a look, that silent communication that seemed unique to siblings who shared DNA and life experiences in equal measure. Then Olivia spoke, her voice steadier than her sister's, though her hands remained clasped tightly in her lap. We grew up in Riverdale, just the three of us, me, Haley, and our mom, Sandra. Dad left when we were babies. Mom raised us alone. worked two jobs most of our lives. Olivia's gaze drifted to the fire, the flames reflecting in her eyes. We both got scholarships to Oregon State, full rides, agricultural science for Haley, business for me. Mom was so proud. Haley picked up the narrative, the twins trading the story between them as if it were a shared burden. We graduated last June. Everything was perfect. We had job offers, plans. Then in August, Mom had an accident at work, a machine malfunctioned at the processing plant where she worked nights. Something about a safety guard that wasn't maintained properly. Her voice dropped. She survived, but her spine was damaged. She couldn't work anymore. Mason felt Emma's weight grow heavier against him as she drifted towards sleep, but his attention remained fixed on the twins and their story. We came home to take care of her, Olivia continued, turned down the job offers. We thought it would be temporary, that she'd heal, that the company's insurance would cover it. She laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. We were so naive. Mason nodded, understanding all too well how quickly life's foundations could crumble. The company fought the claim, Haley said, a flash of anger breaking through her composed exterior. Blamed her for the accident, said she violated safety protocol. Meanwhile, Mom's medical bills kept piling up. We worked 3 jobs between us. I was at the feed store and doing harvest work. Olivia waitressed and did bookkeeping for local businesses. But it wasn't enough. Olivia's voice cracked. Mom's condition got worse in October. Infection, complications. She spent a week in the ice. She died October 23rd. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. I'm sorry, Mason said quietly. The words felt inadequate, but he meant them deeply. Haley wiped her eyes quickly with the back of her hand. The medical debt was over $80,000. The collectors came after everything, our mom's house, this farm, anything with value. We tried to fight it, but we didn't understand the legal system. We didn't have money for lawyers. By December, we had nothing left. Her voice hardened. We were sleeping in our car. Then the car broke down and we couldn't afford to fix it. Someone at the diner mentioned this farmhouse, Olivia added, said it had been abandoned for years. We thought maybe just for a few weeks, until we could save enough for first and last month's rent somewhere. But everywhere requires an address, references, proof of employment. Hard to get any of that when you're homeless. Mason looked at them, these 2 young women who'd done everything right, who'd earned scholarships and graduated college, who'd tried to care for their mother, only to have everything ripped away through no fault of their own. He knew that story. He was living a version of it. How old are you? He asked. 24, they said in unison. Emma had fallen fully asleep now, her breathing soft and even against his side. Mason looked down at his daughter's peaceful face, then back at the twins. He thought about the motel room where they'd spent those awful weeks after the foreclosure, about the shame of selling Rachel's jewelry, the last physical pieces of her he had, just to buy groceries, about the desperate, clawing feeling of having nowhere to turn. These girls had lost their mother. He'd lost his wife. They'd lost their home. So had he. They were trying to rebuild from nothing. So was he. How long have you been here? He asked. 3 weeks, Haley answered. We've been really careful. We haven't damaged anything. We clean every day. We only use the fireplace at night when nobody would see the smoke. She paused. Or we thought nobody would see it anyway. The cardboard on the windows. That your work? Olivia nodded. We found some plastic sheeting in the barn. It keeps the wind out. And you cleaned the fireplace, made it safe to use? Haley did that, Olivia said, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. She's good with her hands. She checked the flue, cleared out all the debris, made sure it wasn't going to catch fire or smoke us out. Mason looked at Haley with new interest. You know construction? She shook her head. Not really, but I'm good at figuring things out. I helped build sets for our high school theater program. Did some farm repair work during college. I learned fast. Something was taking shape in Mason's mind. It was probably crazy. It definitely wasn't practical. But then again, neither was buying an abandoned farmhouse with his last $15,000. This place needs a lot of work, he said slowly. The roof leaks in places. The plumbing is shot. Half the electrical needs to be rewired. The floors need sanding and refinishing. It's going to take months to make it actually livable. The twins nodded, clearly confused about where he was going with this. I'm a contractor, or I was. I owned a restoration company in Seattle. Lost it 8 months ago, along with everything else. Mason took a breath. That's why I bought this place. It was all I could afford. A chance to start over with Emma. Emma shifted against him in her sleep, as if responding to her name. Here's what I'm thinking, Mason continued, the idea crystallizing as he spoke. I need help fixing this place up. I can't pay much, barely anything at first. But if you help me with the work, you can stay. We'll figure out sleeping arrangements, get the utilities turned on properly. Make it work. He looked at Haley. You'll learn real construction skills. I get labor. Emma gets... He glanced down at his daughter. Emma gets people around besides just me, ma'am. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of the fire and Emma's soft breathing. Are you serious? Olivia's voice was barely a whisper. I'm serious, Mason confirmed. But there are rules. We're honest with each other, always. We all pull our weight, and we figure this out together as we go. And he hesitated. I need to check you out first. No offense, but I have Emma to consider. No offense taken, Haley said quickly. We understand. Check whatever you need to. Deal, Olivia added, her eyes bright with unshed tears. But why would you do this? You don't know us. Mason considered the question. Why indeed? Why trust two strangers he'd just found squatting in his newly purchased property? The logical part of his brain, the part that had once run a successful business, was screaming that this was insane. But another part, perhaps the part that had been broken and reformed by grief, understood something deeper. Because 6 months ago, I would have done anything for someone to give me a chance. So I'm giving you one. The words felt right as he said them. A simple truth. Olivia stood abruptly and turned away, her shoulders shaking. Haley moved to her sister's side, and Mason heard Olivia's quiet sobs. Thank you, Haley said, her own voice thick with emotion. Thank you. Mason nodded, adjusting Emma in his arms. Get some sleep. We'll talk more in the morning. Figure out next steps. Later that night, after driving to the nearest motel and settling Emma into bed, Mason sat on the edge of the worn mattress, his phone in hand. The small room, with its faded floral wallpaper and musty carpet, was a far cry from the life he'd once provided for his daughter. Yet another temporary shelter in a series that had started the day they'd left their Seattle home for the last time. He dialed a number he hadn't called in months. After 3 rings, a gruff voice answered. Parker, that really you? Hey, Mike. Yeah, it's me. Mason kept his voice low, not wanting to wake Emma. Sorry to call so late. Jesus, man, it's been what, 6 months? How are you? How's the kid? We're hanging in there. Listen, I need a favor. You still with Seattle PD? Mike Roberts had been a client years ago. Mason had restored his 1930s Craftsman in Ballard. They'd stayed friendly, occasionally meeting for beers until Rachel died and Mason had retreated from everyone. Still on the force, yeah. What kind of favor are we talking about? Background check. 2 people. Mason hesitated. It's a long story, but I need to know if they're who they say they are. This about the farmhouse in Oregon you mentioned buying? Yeah, found 2 sisters living in it when I got here, twins. They've been squatting there for a few weeks. Mike whistled low. And you didn't call the local cops because... Mason glanced at Emma, sleeping peacefully for once. Because they're in a bad spot, like we were. Lost their mom, lost their home, medical debt. He paused. Because Emma needs more than just me right now, and I need help fixing this place up. So you're thinking of letting them stay? Christ, Mason, that's either the kindest or dumbest thing I've ever heard. Probably both. Mason allowed himself a small smile. Their names are Haley and Olivia Wilson, both 24, last known address in Riverdale, Oregon. Supposedly graduated from Oregon State last June. Can you run them? See if anything comes up? Give me a day or 2. And Mason, be careful, man. The world's not always kind to people who try to help others. I know, that's why I'm calling you first. After ending the call, Mason stepped outside the motel room. The night air was cold and clear, stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt. 8 months ago, he wouldn't have recognized the constellations visible in this rural sky, too used to Seattle's light pollution. Now he knew Orion, Cassiopeia, the Pleiades, knowledge gained during countless sleepless nights, standing outside similar motel rooms, trying not to wake Emma with his grief. He'd sold Rachel's engagement ring 4 months ago. The 2-carat diamond she'd insisted was too much when he proposed 11 years ago. We need to start our life together, not spend it all on a ring, she'd protested. He'd bought it anyway, wanting to give her the world. In the end, that ring had bought 2 weeks of motel stays and groceries. The wedding band had gone a month later. He'd kept his own wedding ring until last week, when it had paid for gas money to make this trip to Oregon. Mason touched his bare ring finger, the phantom sensation of the gold band still present. Was he making another emotional decision instead of a logical one? Probably, but logic hadn't exactly served him well lately. Logic said to call the sheriff, have the twins removed. Logic said to focus only on Emma, not take on 2 more responsibilities. Logic said trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Yet something deeper than logic had recognized the look in those twins' eyes. The same desperation, the same determination to survive that had driven him these past months. Maybe that recognition was worth more than caution. 2 days later, Mason drove back to the farmhouse, this time with Emma safely at a nearby daycare he'd found. The twins were still there, true to their word. They'd continued cleaning, making the main room and kitchen as habitable as possible with limited resources. Any news? Olivia asked as soon as he walked in, her eyes wary. Haley stood nearby, hands covered in dust from where she'd been clearing debris from a corner. I checked you out, Mason said without preamble. Called some contacts, verified your story. You both graduated with honors. Your mother worked at West Ridge Processing Plant for 15 years. No criminal records, not even a parking ticket. The twins exchanged glances, relief evident in their expressions. So, does that mean, Haley began hesitantly. It means we can try this, Mason confirmed, but we need to establish some ground rules and figure out practical arrangements. They spent the next hour working out sleeping arrangements, schedules, and priorities for the restoration. Mason would take the small bedroom on the ground floor with Emma. The twins would stay in the barn apartment, a space above the old barn that, while rustic, could be made livable more quickly than the upstairs bedrooms of the main house. I don't have much money, Mason explained frankly. The $15,000 for this place was everything. I can get us basic utilities, electricity, water, but materials for repairs, that's going to be tight. We'll need to salvage what we can, find deals, maybe barter some skills in town for supplies. We have about $800 between us, Olivia offered. It's not much, but it can help with immediate supplies. And we both need jobs, Haley added. Whatever we make, we contribute to the household. Fair's fair. Mason nodded, appreciating their straightforwardness. I'll need to find work too. Something local, nothing that takes me away from Emma for too long. Once we get this place in better shape, I can start looking for renovation projects in the area. They continued planning until late afternoon when Mason needed to pick up Emma. Before leaving, he took a final look around the main room, seeing it with new eyes, not as a desperate last resort, but as a project with potential. Maybe even a home someday. I'll bring Emma back after dinner, he told the twins. Maybe by then we can all stay here, at least for one night. Test the waters. As he turned to leave, Olivia called after him. Mason, thank you for giving us a chance, for believing us. He paused at the door. I don't know if I believe in much anymore, but I believe people deserve second chances. We all do. The first night they all stayed at the farmhouse was a study in awkwardness and cautious optimism. Emma, naturally adaptable in the way only children can be, took to the twins immediately. She followed Haley around as she worked on sealing more windows, asking endless questions. Olivia showed her how to sweep properly, turning the chore into a game that had Emma giggling for the first time in weeks. Mason watched these interactions with mixed emotions. Relief that Emma was smiling again. Guilt that it had taken strangers to bring that out in her. Fear that he was making a terrible mistake trusting people he barely knew. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this crazy arrangement could work. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep in their makeshift bedroom, Mason stepped onto the front porch where Olivia sat alone, a steaming mug between her hands. Tea, she offered, gesturing to the thermos beside her. It's just basic black tea, nothing fancy. Mason accepted, pouring some into the spare cup she'd brought. The warmth felt good against his cold fingers. December in Oregon was proving colder than he'd expected. Emma's a remarkable child, Olivia said after a comfortable silence. She's so resilient. She's had to be. Mason stared out at the darkened landscape, the outline of trees just visible against the night sky. I worry about her, though, all the changes, the instability, losing her mom, then everything else. Children adapt better than we give them credit for, Olivia offered. It's the love that matters most. The security of knowing someone cares deeply. She has that with you. Mason swallowed hard, the simple observation hitting closer to home than expected. I hope so. I'm trying. That's all any of us can do. Try our best with what we have. Olivia's voice held no judgment, just a quiet understanding. They sat in companionable silence for a while longer. Mason found himself studying her profile in the dim light spilling from the house. There was a quiet strength to her, different from her sister's more obvious resilience. Olivia carried her pain with grace. Her losses somehow integrated into who she was rather than wearing them like armor. How do you do it? He asked suddenly. Keep going after everything? Olivia considered the question. I don't think there's a choice, really. What's the alternative? To stop living? She turned to look at him directly. Our mom used to say that grief is just love with nowhere to go. So we keep moving forward, carrying that love, finding new places to put it. The words settled over Mason like a blanket, both comforting and heavy with truth. Your mom sounds like she was pretty wise. She was, Olivia smiled softly. I think she would have liked you, another parent doing whatever it takes for their child. The following morning marked the beginning of their real work together. After a simple breakfast of oatmeal and coffee, they assessed the farmhouse's needs systematically. Mason's contractor experience proved invaluable as he identified priorities, fixing the roof leaks before winter storms hit, ensuring the heating system worked, making the plumbing functional, addressing electrical safety issues. We need to winterize immediately, he explained, sketching a rough plan on the back of an old envelope. Temperatures are dropping, and this place is nowhere near insulated properly. They divided tasks based on skills and capacity. Mason would handle the complex electrical work and roof repairs. Haley proved surprisingly knowledgeable about basic carpentry and eagerly took on window sealing and floor repairs. Olivia organized supplies, managed their meager budget, and kept track of progress while handling the simpler indoor tasks. The first test of their arrangement came 3 days later when a sheriff's deputy pulled into the driveway. Mason was on the roof, patching a leak, when he heard the crunch of tires on gravel. The sight of the patrol car sent a jolt of alarm through him. He climbed down quickly, meeting the officer at the front of the house. Through the window, he could see Olivia gathering Emma close, moving her away from view. Afternoon, the deputy said, eyes scanning the property with professional assessment. I'm Deputy Marsh. Got a call about some possible squatters or trespassers out here. Mason wiped his hands on his jeans, keeping his expression neutral. I'm Mason Parker. I bought this property at auction 6 weeks ago. Just moved in recently. The deputy nodded slowly. Got documentation for that? Deed? Bill of sale? In the house. Give me a minute. Mason kept his voice even, though anger simmered beneath the surface. Someone had reported them. He had a pretty good idea who. After retrieving the paperwork and showing it to the satisfied deputy, Mason asked directly, who called it in? Deputy Marsh hesitated, then sighed. Jeff Tanner owns the property that borders yours to the west. Said he'd seen strange women coming and going. Figured I should check it out. As if on cue, a faded blue pickup truck pulled up behind the patrol car. An older man with a weathered face and suspicious eyes emerged, watching the interaction from a distance. Thought I should make sure everything's on the up and up, the man called out. This place has been empty for years. Suddenly, there's people and women I've never seen before. Mason tensed. The property's mine, legally purchased. The women are friends helping me restore it. Everything's legitimate. Jeff Tanner approached, eyeing the farmhouse with undisguised skepticism. No offense meant, just being neighborly, keeping an eye out. This is a small community. We notice strangers. The message was clear. You are not one of us yet. Deputy Marsh, seemingly eager to avoid conflict, handed the paperwork back to Mason. Everything looks in order, Mr. Parker. Welcome to Riverdale County. Word of advice, might want to introduce yourself around town. Let folks know you're here legitimately. Prevents misunderstandings. After the deputy left, Mason found himself facing Jeff Tanner directly. The older man made no move to leave. Those girls staying here with you? Jeff asked bluntly. Young things like that, living with a single man? People will talk. Mason felt heat rise in his neck. My daughter is inside. The women are helping me restore this place in exchange for temporary housing. It's a business arrangement. Jeff snorted. Sure it is. Listen, I've seen their type before. Pretty faces, sad stories. Next thing you know, they've cleaned you out and disappeared. Just giving you fair warning. Their type? Mason's voice hardened. You mean people who've lost everything and are trying to rebuild? People who deserve a second chance? He stepped closer to Jeff, lowering his voice. Sometimes life knocks you down so hard you need a hand getting back up. I'm giving them that hand, and I'd appreciate it if you'd keep your assumptions to yourself. Something in Mason's tone must have registered because Jeff took a small step back. Your funeral, he muttered. Don't say I didn't warn you. He turned and walked back to his truck, calling over his shoulder. By the way, your property line ends at the creek. Anything west of that is mine. Keep that in mind. After Jeff drove away, Mason stood in the driveway, fists clenched at his sides, trying to calm the anger coursing through him. He hadn't expected to make enemies so quickly in their new home. The front door opened behind him, and Olivia stepped out. Everything okay? Mason turned, forcing his expression to neutralize. Yeah, just meeting the neighbor. Not exactly a warm welcome. We heard some of it. Olivia looked troubled. Maybe this arrangement isn't going to work. If it's causing problems for you, it's fine, Mason cut her off. Jeff Tanner doesn't decide who stays on my property. We have every right to be here, all of us. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. But we should be prepared. Small towns talk. People will make assumptions. Olivia nodded slowly. Haley and I can be gone by tomorrow if that would be easier. Is that what you want? No, she admitted quietly. We want to stay, to help, to have a roof over our heads while we figure out next steps. But not if it makes things harder for you and Emma. Mason considered her words, then looked back at the farmhouse. Despite only a few days of work, it already looked more like a home than a ruin. There was still smoke rising from the chimney, but now it represented warmth and cooperation rather than intrusion. Emma's laughter drifted from inside, where she was undoubtedly helping Haley with some project. You're staying, he said firmly. We made a deal. Besides, Emma would never forgive me if I sent away her new best friends. Relief washed over Olivia's face. Thank you. We won't let you down. I know you won't. The certainty in his voice surprised even him. Now let's get back to work. Daylight's burning, and that roof won't fix itself. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm of hard work and gradual progress. The twins found jobs in town, Haley at Brennan's Hardware where her knowledge of tools proved valuable, Olivia at Miller's Cafe waiting tables. Their income, combined with Mason's dwindling savings, allowed for critical supplies and utility payments. Mason focused on making the house structurally sound and safe. Each evening, they would gather around the kitchen table, rescued from the barn and sanded down by Haley, to eat simple meals and discuss the day's achievements and challenges. Emma thrived in this new environment, her nightmares becoming less frequent, her questions about her mother less desperate. Then came the evening that changed everything. Mason was installing new wiring in what would eventually become the living room when Emma's voice floated down from upstairs where she'd been helping Olivia sort through old furniture. Did my mommy go to heaven like your mommy? Mason froze, his hands stilling on the wires. In the silence that followed, he could hear his own heartbeat, loud and fast. Olivia's voice, gentle but not condescending, carried clearly. I believe she did, yes. Do you miss your mommy a lot? Every day, sweetheart. Every single day. Me too. Emma's voice grew smaller. Daddy gets sad when I talk about mommy. Sometimes he cries when he thinks I'm sleeping. Mason's chest tightened painfully. He hadn't realized Emma had noticed. That's because your daddy loves your mommy very much, just like you do, Olivia explained. And when we love someone who isn't here anymore, It hurts our hearts to talk about them sometimes. But if we don't talk about Mommy, I might forget her. Emma's voice trembled. I already can't remember what her voice sounds like. Mason felt tears burning behind his eyes. He should go upstairs, handle this himself. But his feet seemed rooted to the spot, his throat too tight to speak. You won't forget her, Olivia assured Emma, because the love stays, even when the memories get a little fuzzy. And you know what? Your daddy has pictures of your mommy and stories about her. Maybe you could ask him to share those with you a little bit at a time. Not all at once, because that might make him too sad, but just one memory or one picture every day. Like taking medicine, Emma asked, her tone serious. Small doses? Olivia's laugh was warm. Exactly like that. Small doses of memory medicine. And you know what else helps? Talking to other people who understand what it's like to miss someone so much. Like you and Haley. Like us. You can always talk to us about your mommy anytime you want. It won't make us sad the same way it makes your daddy sad, because we didn't know her, but we understand what it feels like to miss someone you love. Olivia, Emma's voice became hesitant. What does heaven look like? There was a pause and Mason held his breath. I think heaven probably looks different for everyone, Olivia finally said. For my mom, I imagine it's a beautiful garden with every kind of flower, because she loved gardening. For your mommy, it might be whatever place made her happiest when she was here with you. She liked the beach, Emma offered. We went to the beach for my birthday, and she built a big sand castle with me. Then I bet heaven for her has the most beautiful beach with perfect sand for castles, and she can watch you from there, feeling proud of what a brave, kind girl you are. Mason heard a rustling sound, then Emma's muffled voice. She must have moved into Olivia's arms. He quietly set down his tools and moved to the bottom of the stairs, finally finding the strength to climb them. When he reached the doorway of the upstairs room, he saw Emma curled in Olivia's lap, her small hand tracing patterns on Olivia's sleeve. Olivia looked up, meeting his eyes over Emma's head. Her expression held no judgment, only compassion. Daddy! Emma noticed him and straightened. Olivia and I were talking about Mommy in heaven. Did you know Olivia's mommy is in heaven too? And she still misses her, even though she's a grown-up. Mason swallowed hard. Is that so? Olivia gently shifted Emma off her lap. I should go check on dinner. You two talk for a bit, okay? As she passed Mason in the doorway, their eyes met again. Something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude from him, understanding from her. Their shoulders brushed lightly, and for a moment Mason felt steadied by the brief contact. After Olivia left, Emma patted the floor beside her. Sit with me, Daddy. I want to ask you something important. Mason settled beside his daughter, his knees protesting after hours of crouching to work on the wiring. What is it, sweetheart? Can you tell me one story about Mommy? Just one. Small doses, Olivia said. Emma's eyes were earnest, hopeful in a way he hadn't seen in months. Mason took a deep breath. Small doses. That sounds like a good idea. He wrapped an arm around Emma's small shoulders. Did I ever tell you about the day Mommy and I found out we were going to have you? Emma shook her head, snuggling closer. Tell me. For the first time since Rachel died, Mason found himself talking about her without feeling like his chest would split open. Just one small story, one precious memory, shared with the daughter who needed to hear it. Maybe Olivia was right. Perhaps they could find a way to keep Rachel's memory alive without drowning in grief. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Mason found Olivia on the front porch, wrapped in a blanket against the December chill. She seemed lost in thought, staring up at the star-filled sky. Thank you, he said simply, sitting beside her on the porch steps. For what you said to Emma today, about Rachel. Olivia turned to him, her expression soft in the dim light. You don't need to thank me. She's trying to process something impossibly difficult. So are you. I haven't been doing a very good job of helping her with it. The admission felt raw but necessary. I've been so focused on our survival, on keeping a roof over our heads, that I've been avoiding the emotional stuff. That's understandable, Olivia said gently. You can't pour from an empty cup, Mason. You've been in survival mode. Still, he shook his head. I should have found a way to talk to her about Rachel. Every time I try, I can't find the words. Sometimes the words aren't there, Olivia acknowledged. That's okay too. You're doing the best you can in an impossible situation. Don't be so hard on yourself. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the cold air carrying the scent of pine from the surrounding trees. Mason found himself studying the farmhouse, their home, or what would become their home. Despite its dilapidated state, he could see the potential now, the bones of something worth salvaging. I've been meaning to ask, he said finally. The fireplace. How did you know how to fix it? A small smile played at Olivia's lips. That was all Haley. She's the hands-on one between us. I handle the books, she handles the tools. Always been that way. Her expression turned wistful. When we were kids, our mom worked so much that Haley basically became the household engineer, fixing leaky faucets, patching holes in the wall, rewiring lamps. She has this intuitive understanding of how things fit together. She's talented, Mason agreed. With proper training, she could be excellent in construction. That's actually what she wanted to do, Olivia revealed, before everything happened with Mom. She had a job lined up with a sustainable building company in Portland. Mason felt a pang of regret for the twins' derailed futures. And you, what was your plan? Business management for an organic farm collective. Olivia shrugged lightly. I'm good with numbers, logistics, planning. Not very exciting, but satisfying. Sounds like you two were set. We were. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. But you know what? Plans change. Life happens. We adapt. We adapt, Mason echoed, finding unexpected comfort in the simple philosophy. The conversation might have continued, but the sound of a vehicle pulling into the driveway drew their attention. Headlights swept across the front of the house as a small sedan approached. Are you expecting someone? Olivia asked, tension evident in her voice. Mason stood, immediately on guard. No, stay here. He moved down the porch steps as the car came to a stop. A woman emerged, her professional attire visible even in the dim evening light. She carried a briefcase and wore an expression of practiced neutrality. Mr. Parker, she called, approaching with confident steps. I'm Diane Wilson from Child Protective Services. I'm sorry to drop by unannounced, but we received a report concerning your daughter Emma's living conditions. Mason felt the ground shift beneath his feet. CPS, someone had called CPS about Emma. His mind immediately flashed to Jeff Tanner, but he forced himself to remain calm. This is my property, he said evenly. Emma is well cared for. I'm sure she is, Diane replied, her tone professional but not unkind. However, we're required to follow up on all reports. I'll need to schedule a home inspection and interview within the next 30 days. From the porch, Olivia watched silently, the blanket clutched around her shoulders like a shield. Mason could feel the weight of her gaze, along with the crushing pressure of this new threat. Everything he'd been working toward, this desperate attempt to create stability for Emma, now hung in the balance. Of course, he managed, his voice steadier than he felt. Whatever you need. As Diane outlined the requirements for the upcoming inspection, Mason's mind raced through the implications. The house was nowhere near ready. The sleeping arrangements were makeshift at best. Their financial situation was precarious. And now there were 2 additional adults living with them in an unconventional arrangement that would certainly raise eyebrows. After Diane left, Mason remained in the driveway, staring after her taillights as they disappeared down the long drive. Olivia approached silently, standing beside him in the cold night air. CPS, Mason said flatly. Someone reported us. Jeff Tanner? Olivia guessed. Probably. Doesn't matter who. What matters is we have 30 days to make this place pass inspection, or... He couldn't finish the sentence. The alternative was unthinkable. Olivia's hand found his arm, her touch light but grounding. Then we have 30 days to make it work. We will, Mason. All of us together. He turned to look at her, finding unexpected strength in her steady gaze. This isn't your problem. You and Haley didn't sign up for this. We're in this together now, she said firmly. Emma needs this home. You need this home. And frankly, so do we. Her grip on his arm tightened slightly. We'll make it work, whatever it takes. In that moment, standing in the cold December night, with the weight of seemingly insurmountable challenges before them, Mason felt something he hadn't experienced in months, hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope that had sustained him through the worst days after Rachel's death, but something steadier, more resilient, the kind of hope that comes from knowing you're not facing the storm alone. Whatever it takes, he agreed, his voice finding new resolve. The farmhouse loomed behind them, broken but standing, much like the four souls who now called it home. Whatever it takes. 6 weeks passed in a blur of sawdust, paint fumes, and gradual transformation. January's bitter cold gave way to February's damp chill, but inside the farmhouse, warmth had begun to take hold. Not just from the now reliable heating system Mason had coaxed back to life, but from the rhythm of four lives learning to move in tandem. The once abandoned structure had transformed from a desperate last resort into something that, while far from perfect, increasingly resembled a home. Mason stood at the kitchen counter, reviewing the checklist for the CPS inspection scheduled for that afternoon. The knot in his stomach tightened with each item he considered. Plumbing, functional if temperamental. Electrical, safe though not yet complete. Sleeping arrangements, acceptable though not ideal. Documentation of Emma's schooling, organized and ready. Financial stability, this was where his confidence wavered. The meager construction jobs he'd picked up locally barely covered essentials. Without the twins' contributions from their jobs in town, they would have fallen short weeks ago. The sound of Emma's laughter drifted in from outside, where Haley was showing her how to identify different types of wood scraps. The child who had once been silent for days after her mother's death now bubbled with questions and observations, her natural curiosity reawakening under the patient attention of their unexpected housemates. Mason watched through the window as Emma solemnly held up a piece of oak for Haley's inspection, her face serious with concentration. The kitchen door opened, bringing a gust of cold air, and Olivia, returning from her morning shift at Miller's Cafe. Her cheeks were pink from the February wind, her blonde hair escaping from its practical ponytail. She carried a paper bag that released the aroma of freshly baked bread. Day-old bread from the cafe. She set the bag on the counter. Miller lets the staff take it home rather than throw it away. I thought it might help with lunch. Mason nodded gratefully. These small provisions, Olivia's rescued bakery items, Haley's employee discount at the hardware store, Mason's ability to repair rather than replace, had become their economic lifeline. The inspector will be here at 2. Mason pushed the checklist toward her. We've addressed most of the safety concerns, but I'm worried about the financial stability part. If they think we can't provide properly for Emma, the unfinished sentence hung between them. The possibility of losing Emma had haunted Mason since Diane Wilson's first visit, materializing in nightmares where faceless officials carried his daughter away while he stood helpless. Olivia studied the list, her brow furrowed in concentration. We have 3 steady incomes now, even if they're modest. The utilities are current. There's food in the pantry. She looked up, her blue eyes meeting his. Children don't need luxury, Mason. They need security, stability, and love. Emma has all 3 here. The simple confidence in her assessment steadied him. Over these weeks, Olivia had revealed herself to be the practical counterbalance to his tendency toward worst-case scenarios. While Haley's talents lay in physical creation and repair, Olivia excelled at organization, at transforming chaos into manageable plans. What if they ask about, Mason gestured vaguely, encompassing the unconventional nature of their household. About us? Olivia's expression remained calm. We tell the truth. We're helping each other rebuild our lives. There's nothing shameful in that. She paused, then added softly, the truth has a clarity that lies never achieve. Outside, Emma had moved on to sorting nails by size, her small hands working with careful precision under Haley's guidance. The sight crystallized something in Mason's chest, a protective determination that transcended fear. You're right. He straightened, squaring his shoulders. We have nothing to hide. The hours before the inspection passed in a flurry of final preparations. Mason secured the last loose handrail on the stairs. Haley double-checked the window locks and smoke detectors. Olivia organized Emma's medical records, school enrollment papers, and the documentation of Mason's legal custody. By 1:30, they had done everything humanly possible to prepare. Emma, dressed in her cleanest jeans and the sweater Olivia had found at the local thrift shop, sat at the kitchen table coloring. Mason knelt beside her, his voice gentle. "Remember what we talked about? A lady is coming to see our house today." Emma nodded without looking up from her drawing. "Because she wants to make sure I'm okay." "But I'm already okay, Daddy." The simple certainty in her voice nearly undid him. Mason swallowed against the sudden tightness in his throat. "I know you are, sweetheart, but sometimes grown-ups need to check these things officially. Like when you check if the electricity is working before you turn on the lights." Emma's comparison, so innocent yet surprisingly apt, pulled a smile from him. Exactly like that. Precisely at 2 o'clock, Diane Wilson's sedan pulled into the driveway. Mason met her at the door, projecting a confidence he didn't entirely feel. The CPS worker's expression revealed nothing as he invited her inside. The inspection was thorough and professional. Diane checked smoke detectors and electrical outlets. She examined the kitchen, bathroom, and sleeping areas. She reviewed Emma's schoolwork and health records. She interviewed Mason privately, then spoke with Emma alone for 15 minutes that felt like 15 hours. Throughout it all, Haley and Olivia maintained a respectful presence, answering questions when addressed but otherwise staying in the background. They had agreed this approach made the most sense, present but not intrusive, demonstrating their supportive role without complicating the official family structure. Finally, Diane asked to speak with all the adults together. Emma was settled at the kitchen table with her crayons, safely out of earshot but within Mason's line of sight. "Mr. Parker, I'd like to understand the exact nature of this living arrangement." Diane's tone remained neutral, but her gaze moved deliberately between the three adults. "My report notes that Ms. Haley and Ms. Olivia Wilson are not related to you, yet they live on the property and appear to have significant interaction with your daughter." Mason felt a flush of defensiveness rise in his throat, but before he could respond, Olivia spoke, her voice calm and measured. "Ms. Wilson, we understand your concern. The situation is unconventional, but it's based on mutual need and respect. Mason and Emma needed help restoring this property to make it properly livable. My sister and I needed housing after losing our mother and our home. We exchange our labor and a portion of our incomes for lodging while maintaining appropriate boundaries. And there are no romantic entanglements in this arrangement?" Diane's question hung in the air, laden with unspoken concerns. "No," Mason's response came perhaps too quickly. "It's a practical arrangement. Nothing more." Something flickered across Olivia's face so briefly that Mason almost missed it. Had he imagined that momentary shadow in her eyes? Diane made a note, then closed her folder. "Mr. Parker, I'll be direct. The concerns that prompted this investigation appear largely unfounded. The home is safe, Emma is clearly well-adjusted and cared for, and you've made remarkable progress on the property." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "However, I do have some reservations about the stability of this arrangement. The financial situation remains precarious, and the unconventional household composition raises questions about long-term viability." Mason felt his heart sink. "What does that mean for us?" "It means I'm approving your current living situation, but with conditions." Diane's tone softened slightly. "You have 60 days to demonstrate increased financial stability. I'll need to see proof of steady income, continued safety improvements to the property, and documentation of Emma's ongoing educational progress. I'll be conducting a follow-up inspection at that time." Relief washed through Mason so intensely that for a moment he couldn't speak. Approval, conditional, yes, but approval nonetheless. "Thank you," he finally managed, his voice rougher than intended. "We'll meet all the requirements." After Diane left, the tension that had gripped the household all day dissolved into cautious celebration. Haley twirled Emma around the kitchen, while Olivia pulled together an impromptu special dinner from their modest supplies. Mason watched them, this makeshift family unit that had somehow formed around him and his daughter, and felt a complex emotion he couldn't quite name, part gratitude, part wonder, part lingering fear. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, the adults gathered around the kitchen table with cups of tea, discussing their next steps. "We need more income," Haley stated the obvious, her practical nature cutting to the chase. "The jobs we have keep us afloat, but barely. To really stabilize, we need something more substantial." Mason nodded, turning his mug between his palms. "I've been thinking about that. There's a historic church in town that needs restoration work. The pastor mentioned it when I fixed their community hall door last week. If I could secure that contract, it would be a significant project, much better pay than these small repair jobs. Do you have the necessary licenses to take on a project that size? Olivia's question wasn't doubtful, merely practical. Mason's expression tightened. My contractor's license from Washington isn't valid here. I'd need an Oregon license, business insurance, bonding, all things that require money up front, money we don't have. Silence settled over the table as the reality of their situation pressed in. The paradox was maddening. They needed money to get the credentials, to get the work, to make the money. What if, Haley began hesitantly, then stopped, shaking her head. Never mind. No, what were you going to say? Mason encouraged. Haley exchanged a glance with her sister before continuing. What if we pooled everything? Olivia and I have been saving what we can from our jobs. It's not much, about $600, but maybe it would help with the licensing costs? Mason stared at her, genuinely taken aback. You'd do that? Put your savings toward my business license? Our business, Haley corrected softly. If you'd be willing to teach me properly, bring me on officially. I want to learn real construction, not just hardware store basics. The offer hung in the air between them, representing far more than a simple financial transaction. It was trust, commitment to their shared future, a belief in possibilities beyond mere survival. We're in this together now, Olivia added, her eyes meeting Mason's across the table. Emma's future, this home, all of it. We succeed together or fail together. Mason felt something shift inside him, a wall crumbling that he hadn't even realized he'd built, the stubborn self-reliance that had isolated him even before Rachel's death, the pride that had sometimes put distance between him and those who tried to help. Together then, his voice was rough with emotion. I'll teach you everything I know, Haley. And if we get the church contract, you'll be my official assistant. The next morning, they began the process of establishing Second Chance Restoration as a legitimate business. The paperwork was daunting, the fees substantial, but with their combined resources and Olivia's organizational skills, they managed to navigate the bureaucratic maze. By month's end, Mason had his Oregon contractor's license, basic business insurance, and the legal right to bid on larger projects. The church opportunity proved more complex than anticipated. First United Methodist was a historic building dating back to 1891, and the Restoration Committee was understandably cautious about entrusting their beloved landmark to an unknown contractor. Mason's presentation to the church board was meticulous, showcasing his previous restoration experience in Seattle and offering a competitive bid that he'd calculated to the penny with Olivia's help. We understand you're new to the area, Mr. Parker, the head of the Restoration Committee remarked, reviewing the proposal. While your past work is impressive, we're naturally hesitant about working with someone without local references. Mason felt his hopes dimming, but before he could respond, Pastor Michael Thompson spoke up. I've seen Mr. Parker's work firsthand. He repaired our community hall steps and doors last month. Craftsmanship far beyond what was required for such a small job. He treated our modest project with the same respect he'd give a historic restoration. The unexpected endorsement shifted the atmosphere in the room. After further discussion and a second interview the following week, Mason received the news they'd been waiting for. Second Chance Restoration had been awarded the contract for the first phase of the church renovation. That evening, they celebrated with ice cream for Emma and a single bottle of champagne for the adults, shared in mismatched cups from the farmhouse's eclectic collection of dishware. The modest celebration marked their first true victory since coming together, tangible progress beyond mere survival. As March arrived, bringing hints of spring to the Oregon countryside, their routine evolved to accommodate the church project. Mason and Haley worked on-site 3 days a week, with Mason spending the remaining time on the farmhouse and smaller local jobs. Emma attended the local elementary school, thriving in kindergarten with a resilience that continually amazed her father. Olivia balanced her cafe shifts with managing their household finances and occasionally assisting at the church when extra hands were needed. The work proved to be exactly what Mason had needed professionally. The church's historical significance demanded the kind of meticulous craftsmanship that had once been his company's hallmark in Seattle. The technical challenges engaged his mind fully, providing a respite from grief and worry. Teaching Haley brought unexpected satisfaction as well. Her natural talent combined with eager curiosity made her a quick study. "You've got an intuitive understanding of structural integrity," Mason observed one afternoon as they assessed damage to the church's ornate ceiling moldings. "Most apprentices take years to develop that kind of eye." Haley's cheeks flushed with pleasure at the compliment, though she tried to deflect it with practicality. "Farm life teaches you to notice when things are about to fall apart, usually right before they do." Their easy working relationship occasionally raised eyebrows among the church volunteers and local contractors who assisted with larger tasks. In a field still dominated by men, particularly in rural Oregon, Haley's presence as more than a helper was unusual. Some accepted it without comment. Others were less subtle in their skepticism. "Isn't that molding work a bit delicate for a young lady?" remarked Ron Fletcher, a semi-retired carpenter helping with the project. His tone was jovial, but underscored with dismissiveness that made Mason bristle. Before Mason could respond, Haley looked up from the intricate corner piece she was replicating, her expression pleasantly neutral. "Delicate work requires patience and precision, Mr. Fletcher. Fortunately, those qualities aren't determined by gender." The simple dignity of her response, delivered without anger or defensiveness, impressed Mason. He'd have likely responded with sharper words, potentially damaging their standing in the community they were still trying to join. Haley's approach diffused the situation while maintaining her boundaries. As the weeks passed, the church project progressed ahead of schedule, building Second Chance Restoration's reputation in the community. Mason found himself referred for additional work, smaller jobs that nonetheless represented a growing acceptance and trust. The financial strain that had defined their first months began to ease, though they remained far from comfortable. Emma's 6th birthday arrived in late March, an occasion that triggered a wave of grief for Mason. Rachel had always made birthdays magical, planning for months with handmade decorations and traditions that created memories more precious than any store-bought gift. The thought of Emma's first birthday without her mother threatened to overwhelm him with inadequacy. Olivia found him on the porch the night before, staring into the darkness, a crumpled list of birthday ideas discarded beside him. "She deserves something special." Mason's voice was low, tight with emotion. "But everything I think of feels hollow compared to what Rachel would have done." Olivia settled beside him, pulling her cardigan closer against the March chill. "You don't need to replicate what Rachel did. You just need to be present for Emma in your own way." "What if that's not enough?" "It is enough. You are enough." Olivia's words held such quiet certainty that Mason found himself wanting to believe them. "Children don't need perfection, Mason. They need love that meets them where they are." The next morning, Emma woke to find a treasure hunt throughout the house, with clues leading to small, thoughtful gifts: a set of colored pencils, a bird identification book, a handmade wooden box crafted by Haley for her growing collection of special rocks. The simplicity of the celebration, far from disappointing her, seemed to delight Emma all the more for being manageable and personal. That afternoon, 2 of Emma's classmates came for cake and games in the farmhouse's newly refinished living room. The modest gathering represented a milestone in their integration into the community. Other parents now trusted the unconventional household enough to send their children there. As Mason watched Emma showing her friends the garden plot Haley had helped her prepare for spring planting, he felt a bittersweet pride. His daughter was healing, adapting, growing. The hole left by Rachel's absence would never completely fill, but Emma was finding joy again. Perhaps, he realized with a start, they both were. The thought brought both comfort and a fresh wave of guilt. Was it a betrayal of Rachel to find moments of happiness? To appreciate the new rhythms of their life? To notice the way sunlight caught Olivia's hair when she stood at the kitchen window? Or how her rare, full smile transformed her serious face? These thoughts had been occurring with increasing frequency, catching Mason off guard and leaving him unsettled. He'd catch himself watching Olivia longer than necessary, noticing details he had no business noticing: the graceful efficiency of her movements, the quiet strength in her slender frame, the depth of compassion in her interactions with Emma. Earth to Mason. Haley's voice broke into his thoughts as she approached with a plate of birthday cake. "You disappeared inside your head again." Mason accepted the cake, grateful for the interruption of his troubling train of thought. just thinking about how much has changed since Emma's last birthday. Haley's gaze was knowing, too perceptive for comfort. Changed for the better in some ways, I hope? Before Mason could respond, a commotion from the children's play area drew their attention. Emma was showing her friends the wooden box Haley had made, proudly displaying her collection of interesting stones and shells. And this one, Emma held up a smooth black stone with a white quartz line running through it, is special because Olivia is like my new mom, and she found it with me at the creek. The innocent declaration hung in the air. Mason froze, the plate nearly slipping from his suddenly numb fingers. Across the room, Olivia had clearly heard as well. Her body went still, her eyes meeting Mason's in a moment of shared panic. The children, oblivious to the adults' reaction, continued examining rocks and chattering. But the damage was done. One of the mothers, Karen Mitchell, raised an eyebrow, her expression cooling noticeably. The remainder of the small party passed in awkward tension. Mason maintained a cheerful facade for Emma's sake, but he could feel the subtle withdrawal of the other parents, the way their casual questions suddenly probed at the household's dynamics. After the guests departed, taking with them gossip that would undoubtedly circulate through the small community, Mason found Olivia in the kitchen, mechanically cleaning up party debris. "I'm sorry," she spoke before he could, her voice tight. "I never encouraged Emma to think of me that way. I've been careful about boundaries." "I know." Mason ran a hand through his hair, frustration and weariness washing over him. Emma formed that connection herself. She's looking for maternal figures. It's natural, but potentially damaging to your custody situation. Olivia voiced the fear they both recognized. If CPS hears about this, they might question the appropriateness of our arrangement. The unspoken complexity hung between them, the reality that Emma's innocent comment had exposed. There was growing attachment here, not just between Emma and the twins, but among all of them. Attachments that complicated their practical arrangement narrative. "We'll be more careful," Mason finally said, though the words felt hollow. "Make the boundaries clearer to Emma." Olivia nodded, but her eyes held doubt. Could they truly control the emotional connections forming in this shared space? Should they even try on? The question lingered, unresolved, as spring advanced. April brought heavy rains that tested their roof repairs and revealed several previously undetected leaks. The church project encountered complications when structural damage behind the altar proved more extensive than initial assessments had indicated. And most concerning, the community's perception of their household seemed to shift subtly after Emma's birthday comment. Mason noticed it first at the hardware store, where conversations would pause when he entered, resuming with two casual questions about how things were going at home. Emma mentioned that her friend Lily wasn't allowed to come over anymore because her mom said their house was complicated. Pastor Thompson, while still supportive of their work, gently suggested that perhaps Haley might take on less visible roles during Sunday services when they worked on the church. "People talk," he explained apologetically. "They don't understand the nature of your household arrangement. It might be easier if we didn't give them quite so much to speculate about." The implied criticism stung, not least because Mason couldn't articulate exactly what their household arrangement truly was anymore. The clear boundaries of their initial agreement had blurred with time and shared experiences. They were more than landlord and tenants, more than business associates, more than housemates. Yet defining what they had become, this four-person unit built from the wreckage of two families, remained elusive. The tension came to a head during a particularly challenging day at the church. A delivery of specialized lumber arrived damaged, setting back their schedule by weeks. The church committee expressed their displeasure, questioning Mason's project management. Then, as they were packing up tools in frustrated silence, Ron Fletcher approached with false casualness. "Heard an interesting rumor about your setup out at the old Johnson place," he remarked, leaning against a pew. "Folks are saying it's quite the modern family arrangement you have got going. Two pretty young women living with the widower and his daughter. Mighty convenient." Mason's hand stilled on the toolbox. "My personal life isn't relevant to this job, Ron." "Maybe not," Fletcher shrugged, "but people around here care about such things. Traditional values and all that might affect whether folks want to hire you." Haley set down the molding sample she'd been wrapping, her voice carefully controlled. "Mr. Fletcher, we're professionals doing quality work. That's what should matter." Sure, sure. Fletcher's smile didn't reach his eyes. Just passing along what I hear. This community has long memories and strong opinions. Might want to consider that is all. After he left, Mason slammed the toolbox shut with unnecessary force. Damn small-town gossip. In Seattle, no one would care about our living arrangements. But we're not in Seattle, Haley reminded him gently, and we need this community's acceptance to build the business. The drive home was silent, heavy with unspoken concerns. When they arrived at the farmhouse, they found Olivia in the kitchen with Emma, their faces equally serious. Emma's cheeks were flushed, her eyes overly bright. What's wrong? Mason was immediately at his daughter's side, hand going to her forehead. The skin beneath his palm radiated alarming heat. She came home early from school with a fever, Olivia explained, worry creasing her brow. It's been climbing all afternoon. I gave her children's Tylenol, but it hasn't helped much. By evening, Emma's condition had deteriorated alarmingly. Her fever spiked to 103, despite medication. Her breathing became labored, and a harsh cough developed. Mason called the pediatrician's after-hours line, describing the symptoms with growing panic. She needs to be seen right away, the on-call nurse advised. Those symptoms could indicate pneumonia, which can be serious in children her age. You should take her to the emergency room. The words sent ice through Mason's veins. The emergency room meant thousands of dollars they didn't have. Like most small contractors, he had been operating without health insurance since his business collapsed. It was a calculated risk he'd taken out of necessity, one that now seemed catastrophically short-sighted. We'll go right away, he assured the nurse, already gathering Emma's coat and favorite stuffed animal. As he lifted his daughter's burning little body, her usual energy replaced by limp exhaustion, the cost became irrelevant. Nothing mattered except getting her the care she needed. Olivia grabbed her purse and car keys. My car's more reliable for the drive to Riverdale Memorial. Haley can follow with whatever else we might need. The 20-minute drive to the hospital stretched eternally, marked by Emma's increasingly labored breathing and Mason's mounting fear. This helplessness, this terror for his child's well-being, was exactly what he had felt when the doctors had explained that nothing could be done for Rachel. That same crushing powerlessness threatened to overwhelm him now. Olivia drove with steady focus, occasionally offering calm reassurances that penetrated the fog of Mason's panic. We'll be there in 10 minutes. She's getting care soon. Stay with us, Emma. Your dad's right here. At the emergency room, the triage nurse took one look at Emma and immediately moved her to an examination room. The hours that followed blurred into a parade of medical personnel, tests, and growing financial dread. Mason signed form after form authorizing treatments he knew he couldn't afford. Emma was diagnosed with severe pneumonia requiring IV antibiotics, supplemental oxygen, and hospital admission. Are you the only parent? The admitting nurse asked as she processed the paperwork, her eyes taking in Mason's work clothes and weathered appearance. Yes, her mother passed away last year. The nurse nodded sympathetically, then glanced at Olivia, who hadn't left their side throughout the ordeal. And you are... Mason hesitated, the question highlighting the undefined nature of their relationship. She's family, he finally said, the word feeling simultaneously inadequate and profoundly true. Olivia's hand found his, squeezing briefly in silent support. I'm helping care for Emma, she clarified for the nurse. We live together. If the nurse made any judgments about this arrangement, she kept them professionally hidden, continuing with the admission process. By midnight, Emma was settled in a pediatric room, connected to monitors and IVs, her small form nearly lost among the medical equipment. You should try to rest, Olivia suggested softly, noticing Mason's exhaustion. I'll stay awake and watch her. Mason shook his head, unable to contemplate sleep while his daughter fought to breathe. I can't leave her. Not asking you to leave, just to close your eyes for a few minutes, right here in this chair. Olivia's voice was gentle but firm. You can't help her if you collapse from exhaustion. As the night deepened, Mason drifted into uneasy sleep, waking frequently to check on Emma. During one such moment of wakefulness, he found Olivia standing by the hospital bed, gently stroking Emma's hair away from her feverish forehead, whispering words too soft to hear. The tenderness of the gesture, the unguarded affection on Olivia's face in what she thought was a private moment, struck Mason with unexpected force. This woman had no obligation to his daughter, no biological connection, no legal responsibility. Yet here she was, keeping vigil with the same fierce devotion a mother might show. The realization shifted something fundamental in Mason's understanding of what they had become to each other. Morning brought improvement in Emma's condition. The antibiotics began to take effect, her fever moderating, her breathing less labored. The doctor expressed cautious optimism, but advised that she would need to remain hospitalized for several more days. Haley arrived with clean clothes and food from home, her practical support allowing Mason and Olivia to maintain their vigil. As the day progressed, Mason excused himself briefly to speak with the hospital's financial counselor, a conversation that confirmed his worst fears. The cost of Emma's treatment would be catastrophic without insurance. "We have financial assistance programs," the counselor explained, reviewing his income documentation with a sympathetic expression. "But even with maximum assistance, your portion will be substantial." When Mason returned to Emma's room, the weight of this new burden evident in his posture, Olivia immediately recognized something was wrong. She waited until Haley had taken over the bedside watch before drawing Mason into the hallway. "How bad is it?" Mason leaned against the wall, suddenly bone-weary. "Bad. Even with their assistance program, we're looking at thousands we don't have. The church project payment won't come until completion, and we've barely covered the business startup costs." Olivia was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Miller, my boss at the cafe, his wife works as a nurse practitioner at the community clinic. She might know about additional resources." The offer of help, simple and practical, broke something in Mason. The accumulated stress of Emma's illness, financial pressure, community judgment, and his own confused feelings converged in a moment of raw vulnerability. "I don't know how to do this anymore," he admitted, voice barely audible. "Every time I think we're gaining ground, something pulls us back under. I'm failing her, just like I failed Rachel." Olivia stepped closer, her presence steady in the face of his crumbling composure. "You haven't failed anyone, Mason. Not Rachel, not Emma, not yourself." "Haven't I? My wife died and I couldn't save her. My business collapsed. I dragged my daughter across state lines to live in a rundown farmhouse with no heat and no plan. Now she's hospitalized with pneumonia and I can't even afford to pay for her treatment." His voice cracked with the weight of accumulated guilt. "What kind of father, what kind of man does that make me?" "It makes you human." Olivia's words were soft but firm. "Imperfect, struggling, doing the best you can with impossible circumstances. That's not failure, Mason. That's life." She reached up, her hand gently touching his face, turning it toward her. "You know what I see when I look at you? A man who would sacrifice everything for his daughter, who gets up every morning and fights for one more day, one more chance, who has the courage to accept help when it's offered, even when it hurts his pride." The simple truth of her assessment, delivered without pity or judgment, penetrated Mason's defenses in a way nothing else could have. The wall he'd maintained around his grief, his fear, his loneliness, crumbled entirely. Olivia's arms were around him then, holding him as the storm broke, as months of suppressed emotion found release. They stood in the sterile hospital hallway, her slight frame somehow strong enough to support him through the moment of surrender. When Mason finally straightened, wiping roughly at his face, embarrassment threatened to overtake him. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have." "Don't," Olivia cut him off gently. "Don't apologize for being human with me." Their eyes met, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Something had shifted, some barrier dissolving to reveal a deeper connection than either had acknowledged before. The moment was interrupted by Haley appearing at the room's door. "Emma's asking for you both." They returned to the bedside where Emma was awake, her eyes clearer than they had been since the illness began. "Daddy, Olivia, are you mad at each other? I heard talking." "No, sweetheart." Mason smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "We were just figuring out how to help you get better faster." "Good." Emma's voice was weak but determined. "Because we're a family now, and families stay together even when things are hard. That's what you told me when Mommy died, remember?" The innocent wisdom, so characteristic of Emma's perspective, struck them all silent. Mason looked from his daughter to Olivia, seeing in the latter's eyes the same realization that had been growing in his own heart. Whatever labels the world might apply to their unconventional unit, to Emma, and perhaps to all of them, they had indeed become a family. Emma's recovery proceeded steadily over the next 3 days. Mason rarely left the hospital, catching brief naps in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, while Olivia or Haley maintained the bedside vigil. The twins took turns returning to the farmhouse to handle essential tasks and work their shifts, income they now needed more desperately than ever. On the third day, Olivia arrived at the hospital with unexpected news. I spoke with Sarah Miller, the nurse practitioner I mentioned. She knows a pediatrician who runs a sliding scale practice specifically for uninsured children. He's agreed to take over Emma's case once she's discharged, and he's working with the hospital to reduce the admission costs. The assistance came at a critical time. Despite this welcome development, the financial reality remained daunting. Even with reduced bus, the hospital bill would strain their resources to the breaking point. As Mason stood at the window of Emma's hospital room, watching the April rain cascade down the glass, he reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought them to this point. 6 months ago, he'd been alone with Emma, desperate and directionless. Now they had a home, evolving careers, and two remarkable women who had somehow become essential to their lives. Haley entered the room quietly, her expression holding an unusual excitement. I've been talking with the church committee, she began without preamble. The situation with the damaged lumber, I found a solution. There's a salvage yard in Portland that has reclaimed timber from a 19th century warehouse demolition. It's period appropriate and actually higher quality than what we ordered originally. Mason turned from the window, his attention caught by the practical possibility. That would solve the delay, but salvaged timber usually costs more, not less. Usually, yes. Haley's eyes sparked with accomplishment. But the yard owner's father was a Methodist minister. When I explained our project, restoring a historic church that serves as a community landmark, he offered us a significant discount. We'd actually come in under budget for that portion. The news represented their first real break in weeks. Haley, that's incredible work. Mason's genuine admiration brought color to her cheeks. You may have just saved the project timeline. That's not all, Haley continued, her excitement building. While I was negotiating with the salvage yard, I mentioned some of our other restoration challenges. The owner mentioned that Riverdale Historic Society is looking for contractors to bid on restoring the old train station. It's a major project with federal preservation grant funding. The potential of such a contract, stable work for months, guaranteed payment, prestigious portfolio addition, was exactly the opportunity they needed to establish second chance restoration firmly in the community. You've been busy, Mason said, genuine appreciation in his voice. We all contribute what we can, Haley replied simply. You and Olivia have been here for Emma. I've been keeping the business moving forward. That's what family does, right? We cover for each other. The casual use of the word family echoed Emma's earlier declaration, reinforcing the truth they were all gradually accepting. Whatever had begun as a pragmatic arrangement had evolved into something deeper, more permanent, more meaningful. That evening, with Emma sleeping peacefully and her discharge planned for the following day, Mason found himself on the small terrace outside the pediatric ward's family waiting area. The rain had stopped, leaving the air fresh and cool, scented with wet earth and new growth. Olivia joined him there, offering a cup of the marginally improved hospital coffee. Emma looks better tonight, she observed, leaning against the railing beside him. Her color is coming back. The doctor says she can come home tomorrow if her oxygen levels stay stable. Mason sipped the coffee, grimacing slightly at the bitter taste. I never thought I'd be so eager to get back to our half-finished farmhouse. It's home now, Olivia said quietly. For all of us. The simple truth hung in the air between them. Mason turned to face her, really seeing her in a way he hadn't allowed himself before. The delicate strength in her features, the quiet determination in her eyes, the gentle curve of her mouth. In that moment, the feeling he'd been suppressing for weeks crystallized into perfect clarity. Olivia, he began, then stopped, unsure how to articulate the complex emotions surging through him. She waited patiently, her gaze steady on his face, giving him space to find the words. These past months, he finally continued, you and Haley have become essential to us, to Emma, to me, to everything we're building. What started as a practical arrangement has become something else, something more. Something more, she echoed softly, neither confirming nor denying the implication. When I lost Rachel, I thought that part of my life was over. Mason's voice roughened with emotion. I couldn't imagine ever feeling connection again. It seemed impossible, maybe even wrong. Olivia's expression remained open, receptive, but she offered no easy absolution. This was his journey to navigate, his feelings to articulate. But these past weeks, watching you with Emma, working together to build something from nothing, facing these challenges as a unit, Mason took a breath, finding courage for honesty. I've begun to feel things I never expected to feel again. For you. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and irrevocable. Olivia's eyes widened slightly, though whether in surprise at his words or his courage to speak them wasn't clear. Mason, she began carefully, we've been through so much together in a compressed time. Crisis has a way of accelerating connections, creating bonds that might not form under normal circumstances. He felt a flicker of uncertainty. Was she gently redirecting him, providing a rational explanation for feelings she didn't share? That's true, he acknowledged. But does that make the connection less real? No, Olivia replied, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. It doesn't. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint freckles across her nose, the subtle variations of blue in her eyes. I felt it too. This gradual shift from gratitude to friendship to something deeper. But I've been afraid to acknowledge it, even to myself. Afraid of what? Of complicating an already complicated situation. Of disrupting the stability we've created for Emma. Of what it might mean for all of us if, she hesitated, then finished softly, if we follow where these feelings lead. Mason understood her concerns. They weren't just two people considering a potential relationship. They were the core of a fragile ecosystem that included a child still processing grief, a sister whose life was intertwined with Olivia's, a community watching with judgmental eyes, and a shared home and business bound together by necessity as much as choice. I don't have answers, he admitted. I just know that pretending these feelings don't exist isn't working anymore. No, Olivia agreed, her gaze dropping briefly before returning to his with new resolve. It isn't. Neither moved to close the remaining distance between them, both understanding that this acknowledgement was enough for now, a recognition of possibility, of potential, of doors opening rather than closing. Whatever came next would need to be approached with the same care and intention they'd brought to rebuilding their shattered lives. The moment was interrupted by Haley appearing at the terrace door. Sorry to intrude, but Emma's awake and asking for both of you. Well, they turned to go inside. Olivia's hand brushed Mason's, their fingers briefly interlacing in a gesture too deliberate to be accidental. The simple contact conveyed what words had only begun to express: connection, understanding, possibility. Tomorrow would bring Emma's return home, the continuation of their work on the church, the ongoing challenges of building lives from broken foundations. But something had shifted. Some new beginning acknowledged amid the uncertainty. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it not just as people bound by circumstance and necessity, but as people choosing to walk forward together, eyes open to both the risks and the possibilities of the path they were creating step by step. The path that had begun with smoke rising from an abandoned chimney on a cold December day. Seasons turned like pages of a well-worn book. Spring blossoms gave way to summer's warmth, autumn's fiery palette, and winter's quiet contemplation. The farmhouse evolved alongside its inhabitants, rough edges gradually softening, broken pieces mending. 1 year after Emma's hospitalization marked a full cycle of challenges weathered and milestones celebrated, a testimony to resilience and reinvention that none of them could have imagined on that first snowy December day. April sunshine streamed through newly replaced windows as Mason reviewed the blueprints for the Riverdale Historic Train Station restoration. Second Chance Restoration had secured the contract 3 months earlier, their successful work on the Methodist Church serving as the perfect portfolio piece. What had begun as a desperate attempt to rebuild shattered lives had transformed into a thriving small business with a growing reputation for quality historical preservation work. From the kitchen came the sound of Olivia's voice mingled with Emma's laughter, a morning ritual of breakfast preparation and first-grade homework review that had become the heartbeat of their home. Mason paused, allowing himself a moment to absorb the simple joy of those sounds. The tension that had once been his constant companion had gradually released its grip, making space for something he'd believed forever lost: contentment. The previous year's financial panic had given way to modest stability. Mason and Haley's construction expertise combined with Olivia's business acumen had established Second Chance Restoration as the premier historical renovation company in 3 counties. Olivia had reduced her cafe hours to part-time, dedicating more energy to managing the company's books and developing her catering business, Wild Oak Kitchen, which now provided weekend income through farmers markets and small events. Their unconventional family unit had weathered initial community skepticism, eventually earning a grudging respect that, in some quarters, had blossomed into genuine acceptance. Even Jeff Tanner, once their most vocal critic, had moderated his stance after Mason and Haley helped shore up his barn during unexpected flooding last November. Footsteps on the porch announced Haley's return from town. She entered with her characteristic energy, bringing the fresh scent of spring air and hardware store sawdust. Approval came through for the train station balustrade restoration. She dropped a folder of permits on the table, her face bright with satisfaction. The Historical Society Board unanimously approved our modified design. We can start that phase next week. Mason examined the approved drawings, Haley's work, reflecting her growing confidence as a designer as well as builder. This detail work is impressive. The preservation consultant specifically mentioned your sensitivity to historical accuracy while accommodating modern safety codes. I had a good teacher. Haley's acknowledgement carried the weight of their journey together, from reluctant landlord and desperate squatter to trusted mentor and promising protege. By the way, Ethan asked if we need volunteers for the community workday at the station this Saturday. He said he could bring some of the middle school woodshop students. Mason noted the slight color that rose in Haley's cheeks at the mention of Emma's former kindergarten teacher, now the middle school's industrial arts instructor. Ethan Taylor had been a quiet ally during their challenging first months in Riverdale, defending their unconventional household when community whispers threatened Emma's social integration. Over recent months, his professional consultations about historically accurate educational displays for the train station had evolved into increasingly frequent visits to the farmhouse for dinner or weekend coffee. "Tell him we'd appreciate the help," Mason replied, keeping his tone neutral despite his protective instincts. Haley deserved her own happiness, her own connections beyond the family unit they'd created. The students could help with the platform bench restoration. Good experience with minimal risk. Olivia appeared in the doorway, wiping flour from her hands onto an apron. "Emma's lunch is packed. She's just getting her shoes on." Her gaze moved between Mason and Haley, picking up the undercurrents with her characteristic perceptiveness. "Everything okay with the permits?" "More than okay," Haley confirmed, gathering her folder. "I should head out, meeting the lumber delivery at the station in 20 minutes. After Haley departed and Emma had been delivered to school, Mason and Olivia found themselves in the rare state of being alone together in the house, a circumstance that once would have been awkward but now carried a comfortable intimacy. Their relationship had evolved with careful deliberation over the past year, each step forward taken with full awareness of its impact on their interconnected lives. That first acknowledgement of feelings at the hospital had opened a door, but they'd walked through it slowly, conscious of Emma's emotional well-being, Haley's place in their family structure, and the practical realities of their entwined business and household. Private conversations on the porch after Emma's bedtime had gradually led to hands held under starlight, then to cautious kisses that carried the weight of second chances neither had expected to find. Mason watched Olivia now as she reviewed supply invoices at the kitchen table, sunlight illuminating the faint strands of gold in her hair. The sight still struck him with unexpected moments of gratitude for her steady presence, her pragmatic compassion, the way she'd helped build a foundation beneath his feet when he'd been in freefall. "You're staring," Olivia observed without looking up, though a small smile played at the corner of her mouth. Appreciating, Mason corrected, moving to refill their coffee cups. 1 year ago today, we were in that hospital room, wondering if we'd make it through the month. Olivia accepted the offered cup, her fingers brushing his in a deliberate gesture that had become their private language. And here we are, with a thriving business, a healthy daughter, and a home that actually keeps the rain out, most of the time. The qualifier acknowledged the farmhouse's persistent quirks. Despite their considerable improvements, the old structure still revealed new challenges with each season, a stubborn reminder that renovation was never truly complete, only ongoing. I received a letter yesterday. Mason pulled an envelope from his pocket, placing it on the table between them. From the bank in Seattle. Olivia set down her coffee, instantly alert to the significance. The one that foreclosed on your house? Mason nodded. They're finally clearing out abandoned personal property from their foreclosure inventory. There's a storage unit with some of our things, items that weren't worth selling at auction, but that they legally had to preserve. His throat tightened unexpectedly. Photos, papers, some of Rachel's personal items, things I thought were gone forever. The possibility of reclaiming these tangible connections to his previous life stirred a complex mixture of emotions. Hope, apprehension, the recognition that he now viewed his past from the perspective of someone who had built something new rather than someone drowning in loss. When do they need you there? Olivia's practical question anchored him, as always. It's that weekend. I'd need to drive to Seattle Friday, handle the paperwork and retrieval Saturday, return Sunday. Mason hesitated, then voiced the thought that had kept him awake the previous night. I'd like you to come with me, and Emma. The request held layers of meaning beyond the practical assistance of having another adult on the long drive. It represented Mason's readiness to integrate his past and present, to return to Seattle not as a defeated man, but as someone who had found a different path forward, with people who had become essential to that journey. Are you sure? Olivia's question was gentle, her eyes searching his for confirmation. I'm sure. Mason reached across the table, taking her hand. Rachel will always be part of who I am, part of Emma's history, but you're part of our present and future. It feels right to acknowledge that openly, not keep these parts of our lives separated. Olivia's eyes softened with understanding. Then we'll go together. The Seattle trip materialized the following weekend, the three of them making the long drive north with a playlist of Emma's favorite songs and audiobooks. The city's familiar skyline evoked memories for Mason, but they arrived without the crushing weight of grief he'd anticipated. Instead, he found himself pointing out landmarks to Emma, sharing stories of her early years that included Rachel naturally, without the pain that had once made such recollections impossible. The storage facility was located in an industrial area south of downtown. As Mason completed paperwork in the office, Olivia and Emma waited in the car, giving him space for what might prove to be an emotionally challenging task. The facility manager led him to a small unit containing several labeled boxes, the administrative remnants of a life dismantled. Mason had expected to be overwhelmed, but as he sorted through the contents, he found himself able to approach the task with unexpected clarity. He set aside important documents and irreplaceable photos, selected a few items of Rachel's jewelry that had been deemed insufficient value for auction, but held sentimental importance for Emma's future. The wedding album, Emma's baby book, Rachel's journals. When he returned to the car with two modest boxes, Olivia studied his expression with quiet concern. You okay? I am. The realization surprised him with its simple truth. It feels like closing a circle somehow. These memories deserve to be preserved, but they don't define our future anymore. They spent the afternoon showing Emma places from her early childhood. The park where she'd taken her first steps, the waterfront where they'd fed seagulls on Sunday mornings. At Emma's request, they visited Rachel's grave, a place Mason had not returned to since the funeral. Standing there with Emma's small hand in his and Olivia's steady presence beside them, Mason felt an unexpected sense of peace, as if Rachel herself might approve of the family that had formed in her absence, might be glad that her husband and daughter had found love and stability again. That evening, at Emma's insistence, they looked through the photo albums together in their hotel room. Each image sparked questions from Emma, inviting stories that Mason found himself able to share without the crushing grief that had once accompanied them. Olivia listened, occasionally asking gentle questions that helped Emma connect these fragments of her past to her present understanding. Was Mommy funny? Emma asked, studying a photo of Rachel laughing by a Christmas tree. The funniest, Mason confirmed, memories warming his voice. She loved practical jokes. Once she wrapped everything in our refrigerator in gift paper, every single egg, every cheese slice, just to make me laugh after a tough week at work. Emma giggled at the image, then grew thoughtful. I think she would like Olivia, she declared with a child's certainty. Because Olivia makes us laugh too, just in a different way. The simple observation hung in the air, profound in its innocence. Mason's eyes met Olivia's over Emma's head, a world of unspoken emotion passing between them. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep, they stood by the hotel window overlooking the city lights. Mason's arm circled Olivia's waist, drawing her closer in the darkness. Thank you for today, he murmured against her hair, for being exactly what we both needed. Olivia turned within his embrace, her face lifted to his. Today wasn't about me. It was about honoring Rachel's place in your lives while acknowledging that life continues. Her fingers brushed his cheek with tender understanding. Some people never find great love once in a lifetime. You've been fortunate enough to find it twice. That's not betrayal, Mason. It's a rare blessing. The wisdom in her words penetrated the last remnants of guilt that had occasionally shadowed his growing feelings for her. In that moment, Mason recognized that loving Olivia didn't diminish what he'd shared with Rachel. It honored it, by proving that her love had taught him how to open his heart, how to risk vulnerability again despite knowing its potential cost. Their return to Riverdale carried the subtle shift of barriers dissolved, past and present no longer segregated, but woven together into a more complete tapestry. The photos and mementos found places throughout the farmhouse. Rachel's presence acknowledged naturally alongside their current life, rather than preserved in a separate shrine of grief. Spring advanced towards summer, bringing longer days filled with work on the train station project and weekend excursions to swimming holes and hiking trails. The farmhouse garden flourished under Haley's expert guidance and Emma's enthusiastic assistance. Second Chance Restoration hired its first 2 employees, local craftsmen who brought additional skills and capacity to handle the growing workload. Olivia's catering business expanded with the seasonal bounty, her weekend stall at the farmer's market becoming a community fixture known for inventive preparations of local ingredients. The additional income allowed them to gradually improve their quality of life, replacing the ancient farmhouse appliances, updating Emma's wardrobe as she grew, establishing the emergency fund that provided security against future medical crises. One particularly humid evening in late May, Mason returned from the train station site to find Haley on the porch swing, her expression uncharacteristically pensive. He settled beside her, respecting the silence until she was ready to speak. Ethan asked me to dinner Saturday. She picked at a loose thread on her jeans, not meeting Mason's eyes. Not as friends discussing the educational display for the station, an actual date. Mason measured his response carefully, recognizing the significance of her sharing this development with him, rather than Olivia. Over the past year, his relationship with Haley had evolved beyond mentor-apprentice into a unique bond that resembled siblinghood in its comfortable understanding. Ethan seems like a good man, he offered neutrally. Respectful, intelligent, genuinely invested in his students. He is. Haley's confirmation came quickly, followed by a hesitation. It's just been Olivia and me for so long. Even after our mom died, we had each other. This feels like, I don't know, like I'm branching off somehow. The vulnerability in her admission touched Mason deeply. For all her practical competence and outward confidence, Haley rarely revealed her deeper uncertainties. Building new connections doesn't mean breaking existing ones. Mason's words emerged from his own journey of the past year. Your relationship with Olivia isn't diminished by exploring possibilities with Ethan. It just means your circle is expanding. Haley considered this, then smiled with genuine warmth. When did you get so wise, Parker? Learn from the best. Mason returned her smile, both of them knowing he meant the Wilson sisters and their resilient approach to life's challenges. So, Saturday dinner, want us to make ourselves scarce? Olivia's been talking about taking Emma to that new animated movie. That would be nice, actually. Haley's expression relaxed into gratitude. I've never really done this before. The dating thing. Between college and taking care of mom and then everything after, there wasn't exactly time. You'll figure it out. Mason bumped her shoulder lightly with his own, a gesture of easy affection that would have been unthinkable a year ago. And if he doesn't recognize how incredible you are, he doesn't deserve your time anyway. The following weeks brought a gentle evolution in household dynamics as Haley and Ethan's relationship developed with careful consideration of their interconnected lives. Emma was delighted to see her former teacher at weekend breakfasts, proudly showing off her growing collection of rocks and her progress in the garden. Olivia welcomed her sister's happiness while being mindful of allowing their relationship space to develop independently. June arrived with unseasonable storms that tested the farmhouse's renovations. Most improvements held, but the aging roof finally surrendered to a particularly violent deluge, sending cascades of water into the upstairs bedrooms and damaging electrical wiring that had been scheduled for replacement later that summer. Mason surveyed the damage with Haley, both of them professionally assessing the scope of necessary repairs. We're looking at a complete roof replacement, Haley concluded, probing a water-darkened ceiling beam, plus rewiring the entire upper floor and replacing significant sections of drywall. 2 weeks' work minimum, even with both of us focusing solely on this. The timing couldn't have been worse. Second Chance Restoration was midway through the critical phase of the train station project, with contractual deadlines that couldn't be postponed without financial penalties they couldn't afford. Their small crew was already stretched thin with the current workload. Not to mention we can't live here during major electrical work, Mason added, calculating costs mentally. Hotel rooms for potentially 2 weeks would eat through our emergency fund. The family gathered that evening for a council of war, as they'd come to call their problem-solving sessions. Emma had been sent to a friend's house for dinner, allowing the adults to speak frankly about their options. We have 3 immediate problems, Olivia summarized, her organizational mind breaking down the challenge into manageable components. First, we need somewhere to live while repairs are underway. Second, we need to complete those repairs without jeopardizing the train station contract. Third, we need to finance all of this without depleting our safety net. The practicality of her approach centered them, transforming an overwhelming situation into a series of solvable problems. This had become their method, facing difficulties together, each contributing their particular strengths to find solutions. I saw a rental listing yesterday that might help with the first problem. Haley pulled out her phone, displaying a local real estate page. House in town, 3 bedrooms, available immediately. Owner is being transferred out of state for work and needs responsible tenants quickly. They reviewed the details. A modest craftsman-style home on Maple Street, walking distance to Emma's school in the town center. The rental price was reasonable, especially split 3 ways, and the location would significantly reduce their commuting costs to the train station project. It's worth looking at, Mason agreed. For the second problem, I could talk to Miguel and Dave about working overtime on the train station while I focus on the farmhouse repairs. And I know someone who might help with the third issue. Olivia had been unusually quiet, considering options. Jeff Tanner mentioned last week that his nephew is a roofing contractor in Portland. He specializes in historic buildings and might be willing to work with us on a reduced rate if we can offer trade services, like finishing the restoration of Jeff's barn that we started during the flood. The mention of Jeff Tanner, once their nemesis, now cautiously approaching something like friendship, highlighted how far they'd come in integrating into the community. Small-town connections that had initially seemed constraining had gradually revealed their value, creating networks of mutual support that had been absent from Mason's previous life in Seattle. The following day brought unexpected developments. The rental house exceeded their expectations, well-maintained, with a functional kitchen that Olivia immediately recognized would accommodate her catering prep needs better than the farmhouse ever had. Emma fell in love with the built-in window seat in what would be her bedroom, declaring it perfect for reading and spying on neighbors. The landlord, impressed by their professional presentation and steady income, approved their application on the spot. Jeff Tanner's nephew not only agreed to handle the farmhouse roof at a discounted rate in exchange for barn restoration work, but also offered to coordinate with his electrical contractor brother-in-law for the rewiring. The arrangement would allow Mason and Haley to maintain their focus on the train station project while ensuring the farmhouse repairs proceeded efficiently under trusted professional oversight. By week's end, they had relocated to the house on Maple Street, setting up a temporary home that rapidly revealed unexpected advantages. The central location reduced their daily travel time. The functional heating and cooling systems provided comfort without constant maintenance. The reliable plumbing and updated kitchen transformed daily tasks from challenges into conveniences. One evening in July, as Mason and Olivia sat on the front porch of the rental house watching neighborhood children play in the summer twilight, a realization crystallized between them. "Emma's happier here," Olivia observed softly, voicing what they had both noticed but not yet acknowledged. "More relaxed, sleeping better." "It's not just Emma." Mason's admission came with a tinge of surprise. "I didn't realize how much energy we were all expending just maintaining the farmhouse until we didn't have to anymore." The conversation opened a door to considerations they might not otherwise have explored. The possibility that the farmhouse, for all its significance in bringing them together, might not be the best long-term home for their evolving family. The idea felt both liberating and vaguely heretical, challenging the narrative they'd constructed about redemption through restoration. Their reflections were interrupted by Haley and Ethan arriving for dinner, their arms full of groceries for the meal they'd volunteered to prepare. The easy domesticity of the scene, Ethan's comfortable presence in their family circle, the natural way he'd integrated into their rhythms, underscored the ongoing evolution of their household. Later that night, after dinner dishes had been cleared and Emma tucked into bed, the adults lingered around the table. The conversation meandered comfortably until Haley straightened, her expression suddenly serious. "I've been thinking about something I wanted to discuss with all of you." She glanced at Ethan, who nodded encouragement. "I found a small apartment above the bookstore on Main Street. The owner is renovating it and looking for a tenant for September." The announcement hung in the air, its implications rippling through the established patterns of their shared life. Mason looked to Olivia, finding his own mixture of surprise and understanding mirrored in her expression. "You're thinking of moving out?" Olivia's question was gentle, free from judgment, but tinged with the natural concern of a sister who had never lived separately from her twin. "I am." Haley's response carried quiet certainty. "We've been talking about it." She reached for Ethan's hand, a simple gesture that conveyed the seriousness of their relationship. "The timing seems right, with us already relocated temporarily in the farmhouse under major renovation." Mason recognized the courage this declaration required. Haley stepping toward independence while respecting the bonds that had sustained them all through the difficult times. "The apartment's right in town, close to the train station project?" 3 blocks away, Haley confirmed. "I'd still be working with you daily, still be part of Second Chance Restoration. This isn't about separation. It's about creating space for growth." Her gaze moved between Mason and Olivia. "For all of us." The unspoken acknowledgement hung in the air, that Mason and Olivia's relationship had its own trajectory, that Emma was flourishing, that their family unit was evolving in ways that might benefit from thoughtful reconfiguration rather than rigid preservation of their initial arrangement. "I think it's a natural next step," Olivia finally said, reaching across the table to squeeze her sister's hand. "And I'm happy for you, both of you." The simple blessing freed something in the atmosphere. Permission to grow, to change, to build new connections while honoring existing ones. The conversation that followed explored practical considerations of Haley's potential move, but beneath the logistics ran a deeper current of recognition that their family was expanding rather than dividing. August brought the completion of the farmhouse repairs alongside significant progress on the train station of the project. The contrast between the freshly renovated farmhouse, structurally sound but still demanding ongoing attention, and the rental house's easy livability sparked increasingly serious conversations about their long-term housing plans. These discussions took an unexpected turn when the owner of the Maple Street house contacted them with a proposition. His company transfer had become permanent, and rather than maintain a distant rental property, he was interested in selling, with first option offered to his current tenants, whom he described as the most responsible renters I've ever had. The possibility of purchasing the townhouse represented a crossroads. The farmhouse held profound significance as the place where their paths had converged. where they had begun the journey from desperate strangers to family. Yet the practical advantages of the townhouse for their current needs were undeniable. What if we keep both? The solution came from Emma during a family dinner, offered with a child's straightforward logic. We could live here because it's closer to school and has better bathrooms, but keep the farm for weekends and projects and helping other people who need houses. The adults exchanged glances, struck by the elegant simplicity of Emma's suggestion. The farmhouse, purchased with Mason's last $15,000 as a desperate gamble for a fresh start, had increased substantially in value thanks to their renovations. Its remote location and sizable acreage made it impractical as their primary residence, but potentially valuable as an investment property or weekend retreat. More significantly, Emma's comment about helping other people who need houses resonated with something that had been taking shape in Mason's mind, a way to honor the chance they'd been given by extending similar opportunities to others. Actually, Mason began slowly, I've been thinking about a potential use for the farmhouse that might make sense. He outlined a concept for using the property as transitional housing for families rebuilding after setbacks, partnering with local social services to provide temporary shelter coupled with construction skills, training through second chance restoration. The idea sparked immediate engagement, with Olivia identifying potential grant funding sources and Haley suggesting modifications to make the space more suitable for varying family configurations. By evening's end, what had begun as a practical housing decision had evolved into a vision for extending their personal redemption story into a broader community resource. September marked 1 year since they'd secured their first major contract with the Methodist Church. The anniversary coincided with the grand reopening celebration for the restored train station, a community event that showcased second chance restorations, craftsmanship to regional officials, and preservation specialists. The project's success secured their reputation and generated inquiries about potential contracts throughout the state. The professional milestone arrived alongside personal transitions. Haley moved into her apartment above the bookstore, creating a space that reflected her emerging independent identity while maintaining close connections with the family. The purchase of the Maple Street house proceeded smoothly, transforming their temporary shelter into a permanent home with room for new memories and traditions. Emma's 7th birthday celebration in late September became a community affair, with classmates, neighbors, and friends gathering in their new backyard. The guest list included faces that would have been unimaginable a year earlier: Jeff Tanner bringing his famous apple cider, Pastor Thompson and his wife contributing a homemade cake, Miller from the cafe arriving with his nurse practitioner wife who had helped during Emma's illness. As Mason watched Emma leading her friends in an elaborate game of her own invention, he found himself standing beside Jeff Tanner near the garden fence. Hard to believe that's the same quiet little girl who arrived in a beat-up truck last December, Jeff observed, his gruff exterior softened by genuine affection. You've done right by her, Parker. The validation from the man who had once been their harshest critic carried unexpected weight. We've all done right by each other, Mason acknowledged, his gaze moving to where Olivia was arranging food on the picnic table, her efficient movements graceful in their familiarity. Sometimes the families we build matter as much as the ones we're born into. Jeff considered this, nodding slowly. Took me too long to learn that lesson. After my Sarah died, I pushed everyone away. By the time I realized my mistake, most folks had stopped trying. His weathered face creased with a rare smile as he watched Emma race past. Good thing some people are more stubborn than others. The simple wisdom from this unexpected source resonated deeply with Mason. How differently things might have unfolded if he had followed his initial instinct to call the police that first night, if he had chosen fear over possibility, isolation over connection. As the party wound down and guests departed, Mason found Olivia in the kitchen, organizing leftovers with her characteristic efficiency. The moment felt right, ordinary yet significant, embedded in the daily rhythms that had become the foundation of their shared life. I've been thinking, Mason began, leaning against the counter beside her, about what happens next. Olivia's hands stilled, her attention shifting fully to him. Next with the business, the farmhouse project? Next with us, Mason's voice softened, containing a certainty that had been building through countless small moments of connection. This past year and a half, finding each other, building this life together, creating this family. It's been the most unexpected gift I could have imagined after losing everything. Olivia's eyes held his, steady and clear. For me too, for both of us. The simple acknowledgement encompassed her own journey from desperate circumstances to newfound stability and purpose. I don't want it to be temporary anymore. Mason took her hands in his, the gesture deliberate and grounding. I want to build something permanent with you, Olivia. A future that we choose consciously, not just one we fell into through circumstance. Understanding dawned in her expression as his meaning became clear. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I am. Mason's smile held certainty alongside vulnerability. Not because it's practical or expected, but because I love you. Because you've taught me that second chances aren't just about survival, they're about finding courage to live fully again and to risk your heart when there are no guarantees. Tears brightened Olivia's eyes, but her smile remained steady. Mason Parker, are you proposing to me over leftover birthday cake containers? I am. Mason laughed softly, appreciating her ability to find humor in solemnity. Though I did plan something more formal with Emma's help for next weekend. She's very invested in the ring selection process. She knows? Olivia's surprise was evident. She suggested it, actually. About a month ago, out of nowhere, Daddy, when are you going to marry Olivia so we can be a real forever family? Mason's recollection carried Emma's matter-of-fact delivery. Kids have a way of cutting through complications to what matters. They do indeed. Olivia stepped closer, her hands moving to frame his face with tender certainty. And for the record, my answer is yes, both to the official proposal next weekend and to this one right here among the birthday leftovers. Her eyes held his, serious despite her smile. I choose you, Mason. I choose Emma. I choose this life we've built together. The simplicity of her acceptance, free from qualification or doubt, washed through Mason with profound relief. This wasn't the passionate intensity of young love or the practical partnership of convenience. It was something deeper, a conscious choice between two people who had seen each other at their most vulnerable and still found reasons to believe in shared possibilities. October brought Emma's carefully planned official proposal, complete with a picnic at the creek where they'd first begun to acknowledge their feelings for each other. Emma's participation, presenting the ring box with solemn ceremony before dissolving into excited giggles, transformed what might have been a private moment between adults into a family covenant, a shared commitment to their collective future. The engagement announcement was met with warm support from those who had witnessed their journey. Haley and Ethan hosted a small celebration dinner at Haley's apartment, marking their evolution from desperate circumstances to chosen family with quiet joy. Community acceptance had grown alongside their integration into local life, with even the most traditional neighbors acknowledging the strength and stability their unconventional family had demonstrated. As wedding plans took shape for a simple December ceremony, marking 2 years since their paths had first crossed, the farmhouse project evolved in parallel. Working with social services and a local nonprofit, they established a program for transitional housing coupled with construction skills training. The property that had once represented Mason's last desperate chance would become a similar opportunity for others facing their own crossroads. November brought an unexpected letter from the hospital where Emma had been treated for pneumonia. The facility's financial assistance program had received a substantial donation specifically designated to cover outstanding pediatric bills for uninsured families. Emma's account balance had been cleared in full, removing the final financial burden from that difficult period. The anonymous nature of the gift left them speculating about its source. Perhaps Sarah Miller pulling strings through her healthcare connections, or the church congregation expressing gratitude for the restoration work, or even Jeff Tanner's gruff generosity disguised through official channels. Regardless of its origin, the gesture represented another thread in the web of community support that had gradually enveloped them. By early December, the farmhouse stood ready for its new purpose. Fresh paint, updated systems, and reconfigured spaces maintained its historical character while enhancing its functionality for future occupants. The property that had once been a last resort had been transformed into a deliberate sanctuary, a place of new beginnings intentionally preserved for others who might need what they had found there. Second chances and unexpected family. The weekend before their wedding, Mason and Olivia brought Emma to visit the farmhouse one last time before its transition to the nonprofit program. Snow dusted the driveway much as it had that first December day, creating a visual echo that highlighted how profoundly circumstances had changed. Emma raced ahead, eager to show her father a snow fort she'd built with Haley during their last work weekend. Mason and Olivia followed more slowly, their hands linked as they approached the house where their story had begun. Strange to think we might never have met if you hadn't bought this place, if the twins hadn't needed somewhere to stay, if I hadn't decided to drive out that particular day, Mason mused, watching his breath form clouds in the cold air. I don't believe that. Olivia's certainty warmed her words despite the December chill. Some connections feel inevitable, don't they? As if they were always meant to find a way into being. Mason considered this perspective, so characteristic of Olivia's quiet faith in meaningful patterns behind apparent chaos. Like the universe conspired to bring together exactly the right broken pieces at exactly the right moment. Something like that. Olivia smiled, squeezing his hand. Though I prefer to think we had something to do with it too. The choices we made when it would have been easier to turn away, to protect ourselves instead of taking risks on each other. Their reflections were interrupted by Emma calling from the porch, waving them forward with eager impatience. They climbed the steps together, steps that had once creaked under Mason's weight as he approached unknown intruders, now solid and welcoming beneath their familiar feet. Inside, the transformation was both subtle and profound. The bones of the structure remained the same, but the space had been purged of desperation, infused instead with intentional hope. The fireplace where they had first faced each other across a gulf of suspicion now stood as the heart of a home designed to nurture new beginnings. Emma darted through rooms, chattering about memories associated with each space, learning to sand floors with Haley in the dining room, baking her first cookies with Olivia in the kitchen, building blanket forts with her father in what had been their first shared bedroom. "Someone else gets to live here now?" she asked, returning to where the adults stood in the main room. "Someone who needs a house like we did?" "That's right," Mason confirmed, kneeling to her level. "A family who's having a hard time like we were. They'll stay here while they figure things out, learn some building skills, and save money for their own place." Emma nodded seriously, processing this information. "Will they know about us, about how we lived here first?" "They will." Olivia joined them, her hand resting lightly on Emma's shoulder. "We've left something for three of them, actually. Want to see?" They moved to the mantel, where a simple wooden box crafted by Haley rested. Inside lay an envelope containing a letter, their story distilled to its essence, along with the house key and a handwritten note. "This key opened more than a door for us. May it do the same for you." The gesture wasn't about claiming credit or imposing their narrative. It was about extending a hand across time to unknown others who might stand where they had once stood, at the threshold between despair and possibility, needing only the courage to step forward. As they prepared to leave, Mason paused at the doorway, taking a final look at the space that had witnessed their transformation from desperate strangers to chosen family. The farmhouse had served its purpose in their journey, not as a final destination, but as a crucial way station, a place where broken foundations had been rebuilt into something strong enough to support whatever came next. Outside, snow had begun falling again, soft flakes catching in Olivia's hair as they walked to the car. The parallel to that first December day was unmistakable, but where fear and uncertainty had once colored the scene, now possibility and chosen commitment defined their perspective. "Ready to go home?" Olivia asked, the question carrying layers of meaning beyond its simple words. Mason looked at Emma skipping ahead, at Olivia beside him, at the path they had forged together through circumstances none of them could have anticipated. "More than ready," he answered, the words emerging as both acknowledgement of their journey and affirmation of their destination. "Let's go home." 1 week later, they gathered at the Methodist Church, the site of their first major restoration project, and now the setting for another kind of restoration entirely. The December ceremony was simple but meaningful, attended by those who had witnessed and supported their unconventional path to finding each other. Emma served as flower girl, taking her responsibilities with characteristic seriousness, until the moment she spotted Haley in the front row, when her composure dissolved into excited waves. Haley stood as Olivia's maid of honor, her quiet pride in her sister's happiness evident in every gesture. Jeff Tanner occupied a place of honor in the front pew, his gruff exterior softened by unmistakable emotion. As Mason and Olivia exchanged vows, their words acknowledged both the unexpectedness of their connection and the deliberate choice to build upon it, recognizing that the strongest foundations often emerge from the willingness to begin again after loss, to risk vulnerability when experience counsels caution, to believe in possibilities beyond immediate evidence. The greatest gift isn't finding someone who never lets you fall, Olivia's voice carried clearly through the restored church acoustics. It's finding someone who helps you stand again when you do. You've been that for me, Mason, not a rescuer, but a partner in rebuilding. When I bought that farmhouse, Mason responded, his eyes holding hers with steady certainty, I thought I was purchasing a chance to start over. A foundation for Emma after we'd lost everything. I never imagined I was really buying the opportunity to find a new definition of home, one built not from lumber and nails, but from courage and trust and second chances. Their hands joined as they completed their promises, the simple gold bands exchanged as tangible symbols of intangible commitment. As the ceremony concluded and they turned to face their gathered community as husband and wife, Mason felt the fullness of the journey that had brought them to this moment. The desperate decisions, unexpected connections, and gradual transformations that had constructed not just a house or a business, but a family formed from chosen bonds. Outside, snow fell softly on the gathered well-wishers, echoing that first winter day, when smoke rising from an abandoned chimney had signaled the presence of strangers who would become essential. The gentle precipitation seemed a fitting backdrop for their celebration, nature's reminder that some endings are merely beginnings in disguise, that renewal follows even the most barren seasons, that hope persists in finding new forms when old patterns fall away. Emma darted through the crowd, trailing ribbons from her flower basket, her laughter bright in the winter air, the sound of a child secure in the knowledge of being deeply loved, not despite life's disruptions, but through them. Watching her, Mason felt a profound gratitude for the unexpected path that had led them here, not the life he had planned, but the one that had found them nonetheless, built from broken pieces reassembled into something stronger at the mended places. As they moved toward the future they had chosen together, Mason reflected on the truth that had emerged from their shared journey. Sometimes the homes that save us aren't the ones we sought, but the ones we have the courage to recognize when they appear unexpectedly before us. Smoke rising from a chimney on a cold December day, inviting us to open the door and discover who waits on the other side.